Welcome back, and delighted to have back with us a very important topic today. Dr. Tim Murphy's back with us. He's a licensed psychologist and clinical director of the Fortis Future, a center focusing on the care of veterans, military, and first responders with PTSD. He's authored a book that I highly champion and make sure that everybody that's in any kind of leadership has this book in their office. It's called The Christ Cure, 10 Biblical Ways to Heal from Trauma, Tragedy, and PTSD. He does have a website, drtimmurphy.com. And by the way, he's also has the scars and the dirty t-shirt of serving in Congress for over 18 years. So.
Okay. That's a new one.
Dr. Murphy, good to see you again. I'm sorry for the technical problems earlier. Let me ask you this. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court heard arguments in a case challenging state restriction on Christian counseling. I mean, this is an arrow to the heart for people like you and myself. Where is this going, Coach?
Well, this is, it's an interesting case, and it has a tremendous amount of distortion in the media. So what happened is Kaylee Childs is a Christian counselor in the state of Colorado. And Colorado has a law, as about 20 plus other states do, that you cannot do something called conversion therapy. Now, conversion therapy is that which where someone who is in the LGBTQ community, so someone thinks they're gay or lesbian, bisexual, or trans, etc., that to convert them back to a heterosexual lifestyle and beliefs. What happens is some of the past work on this was really probably out of line, more aversive, and not really productive in terms of changing how a person acted or believed. And so a number of states began to say, well, we're going to make this an outlaw procedure. But what happened was the way that was presented to state legislatures was very distorted, and saying that even now people are subjected to electric shock therapy, that these techniques are continuing today when they're not. But the Child's case, however, is different. And so here's the true representation. She is saying, well, gee, as the counselor, if a child comes to me, under 18, comes to me and says, you know, I'm not really sure what I am. I sometimes have these thoughts. I'm saying, I'm a guy, I'm attracted to other guys, but I don't really like that. Can you help me not feel that way? Now, notice the request came from the child to change. Well, what happens is in Colorado, you can't do that. You cannot help that person. You can only help them transition towards gender changes or towards being gay or towards lesbian. But if that person asks you to help them to do another way, you can't do it. And this is where she said that really restricts her freedom of speech. And that's the case before the court.
Whoa. Where do you see this going?
Well, it's interesting that the Supreme Court justices were astute enough to say, well, wait a minute. So in Tennessee, where you cannot have a child go through a trans surgery or hormone therapy, in that case, if the counselor is helping someone to not have those feelings, that's okay. But in Colorado, it's not okay. You cannot have this bias of opinion. That's been shown in courts before. You cannot do that. But the thing is that so a number of the Supreme Court justices said this is wrong. If the person comes to you with a request, you ought to listen to their request. But a number of states impose different situations. I'm hoping the Supreme Court overturns this Colorado case. That'll challenge all the other states that are doing this. But it's really important, particularly any counselor, let alone Christian counselors, because in states like Virginia, a counselor is actually required to get training on how to help a child transition their gender. And if someone comes to you, you must help them. So a Christian counselor is not allowed to say, I don't agree with this. It's not part of my faith. You can't even say, I don't agree with this scientifically. It's not part. Or you can't say, I don't take patients who have this concern. In Virginia, you must take them. In other states, it's an issue too. So it's a serious problem, but we're hoping the Supreme Court overturns it.
Okay, let's unpack this a little bit more. It ends up being obviously free speech, but could this eventually silence the pulpit from talking about not transitioning and therefore that being interpreted as biblical counseling?
Well, actually, the way the law is written in Colorado is a person who's a clergy may talk about this. And if someone is seeing that pastor, priest, rabbi, whatever it is, that it's okay for them to do it. But if they have a professional licensed counseling degree and they're doing professional counseling, they're not allowed to. So right now, the way the law is written, it's not something that would impair that. But you're right; it does come to a question: what happens in states like very liberal states like Minnesota, where they don't even want you challenging this? I wonder what would happen if that is something that's challenging what someone's saying from the pulpit.
The other thing that I see here, Dr. Murphy, is, and I don't want to be, negative or cynical, but this, I want to be wise as a serpent here for a moment, and that is, these could be setups. I mean, people could go in there and set this stuff up and just blow this right out of the water.
Exactly. That's precisely what happens. That they'll send someone into the office who may come from a state licensing board or maybe an independent who wants to go in and test out what that counselor's doing. That's where we're all cautioned to be on our guard. And the best response if someone's calling to say, I don't have any room in my schedule, I'm not taking new patients. Now, what does that mean? Someone will eventually come in and they'll say, well, I said I was anxious, but here's the real reason, and what can you do about this? Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can be a setup, and that's the worry that comes across the nation.
You have any feel about the arguments before the court?
Well, this particular one, I think that because of the number of justices that asked questions and pretty much winced at the absurdity of the Colorado law, I think it'll be overturned and may go in a strong favorable position and not just the usual conservative judges, because I think other ones recognize you cannot have this kind of prejudice in the way the law is set up.
Isn't this a religious freedom case?
Absolutely. It's labeled as a freedom of speech case in order to get that through. So that's how Childs looked at this, as I can't even talk about these issues with my clients, not even if they bring them up. I think a good therapist has to raise lots of issues. You can't just say, I'm sorry, I'm only allowed to talk about one direction. And who wants to go to a counselor along those lines? For example, if you are talking to someone who is maybe a different faith, maybe they're Muslim, maybe they're Jewish, and they're whatever they are, and they want to talk about being a Christian, can you imagine if someone says, no, you can't do that. You can only talk about this other faith there. You can't, certain topics are off limits. And note, Perry, there's other cases coming before the Supreme Court, one of Gabriel Oliver, who was preaching in a public park. And the local ordinance says you're not allowed to do that. And so he was, I think, arrested and challenged on that. And he's challenging that case, too, because they wouldn't even let him go to court to challenge it. So there's lots of free speeches of religion that are going to be coming more and more. And thank goodness we have a Supreme Court willing to listen to these issues.
I'm just staggered by this because there, as you well know, there's a Christian counseling crisis in America. I mean, we need trained professional Christian counselors out there by the hundreds, the thousands. I mean, the need is so great, and then to have this coming down on it, man alive, this is really hard.
Well, we're all very concerned. I just attended the annual conference of the American Association of Christian Counselors, and certainly that was the topic that was there. What happens if these cases are not found favorable? Then every Christian counselor may find themselves set up or challenged for dealing with these issues. We've got to remember that freedom of speech, freedom of religion need to be both protected. And for the sake of clients, look at it this way: even if someone is not a Christian counselor, they need to be able to respect and understand someone's religious beliefs, and not be thinking all the time, if that counselor's an atheist, says, well, I'm not going to talk to you about your Christian belief because I don't believe in that God, and I want to talk to you about another thing. Well, that's not right. You do need Christian counselors. You need counselors who are trained to be sensitive to those issues and aware and learned on them. Otherwise, our society will continue to decline in dealing with these issues of depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues.
Do you think it crosses a line in going after clergy?
I think it does. Particularly, I mean, look at the nuance I described. So if clergy is counseling someone and just saying, I'm just talking to you as your pastor, that's one thing. But as soon as they start to use any kind of term of counseling, now most clergy don't have a counseling degree, so they may be buffered somewhat. But note that other case I mentioned, Gabriel Oliver, he was preaching in a public park. Look, all of us have been to cities where someone's standing at a street corner with a Bible and starts talking to people as they go by. That doesn't bother me. That's okay. They don't harass anybody. What's a concern here is in England, you'll actually see cases where someone is arrested for just standing there reading a Bible, praying in public, and said you can't do that anymore. In the meantime, you can hear the call to prayer that may take place in those areas from the Muslim communities. And so, how is one not a problem and the other one is? So, religious freedom needs to be religious freedom here, and these cases will continue to grow. Thank goodness. I'm glad they're growing in the case that they're being challenged and not letting the state legislatures continue to try and restrict these freedoms.
Gosh, because at the end of the day, pastoral counseling is conversion counseling.
Well, there you go. Well, people come to pastors, they say, I'm not comfortable with what I am, who I am, what I do. Can you help me change? That's the whole basis of all counseling. Somebody wants to change, or they say, I want to be comfortable with what I'm doing. And, someone says, well, I'm doing these things in my life, and I know they're wrong, but I want you to help me become comfortable with them. I mean, what if a person says, I'm an arsonist, and I want to be comfortable with that? Well, you wouldn't help them with that. There's a moral and ethical obligation to say, no, that's not right. There's a growing concern. This will make your hair stand on end, but there's a growing concern also for those who are pedophiles to have their desires be acceptable. Saying, well, as long as someone claims, as long as they are not touching someone or actually working with children, that it's okay. And so what if they come to a counselor and say, I want to be comfortable with these feelings? The counselor should be saying, absolutely not. Can't tolerate that. Or whatever those things are. But you're right. The basis of being any kind of pastoral counseling is you're trying to convert a person, not just tell them to be satisfied with their bad beliefs.
All right, I got time for one more question, and it goes somewhat international here, and I want to have your attention go over to Israel just for a moment and what's going on over there. And I think that with all the things that are going on, we forget that these are real people suffering real trauma, unlike anything we've ever seen. It's unimaginable, and the complications that come with that. From your perspective, what does a healing process look like for people over there that have suffered so much emotionally, spiritually, nationally, and are we there to help?
Well, the trauma is intense and prolonged. Remember, this is a faith community that went through the Holocaust, who has been harassed and tortured for centuries. And here it is in real time. Remember, this just wasn't a war. This wasn't just some bombs going off, although that's horrible enough. But this was hundreds and hundreds of people were killed. Those were kidnapped. They were tortured and raped and murdered there and going back to their homes. But the whole nation suffered here because of the intensity of this. And what is going to hurt them is the way that Europe is responding to them. So when countries like France and England are not being supportive of Israel and not recognizing the horrors they've had there, that makes it tougher as a nation to heal. So the United States' role in saying, we're standing by you, we want you to heal, is important. But Israel is very strong and very astute and adept at trying to help people who have trauma in their lives and post-traumatic stress disorder. I remember once visiting one of the areas on the border near the Gaza Strip some years ago, and there was a boy there who just had this blank stare in his face. And I asked his mother, because she said now and then a random bomb comes flying over. And I said, do you have concerns about post-traumatic stress disorder? And she said, there is no post. It's always there. And so in their lives, they'll have a lot of that to deal with. They'll work on this intensely. They'll have many therapists working with them as a nation to heal. What we can do is to be supportive of Israel as a nation, be supportive of those American hostages who are back here, be supportive of people being able to practice their faith without the fear of being attacked by these brutal terrorist organizations.
Wow. Dr. Murphy, thank you for your time. We value it greatly. You're quite a guy. And I just want to say to our viewers and listeners, you have to have his book in your office. It's called The Christ Cure, 10 Biblical Ways to Heal from Trauma, Tragedy, and PTSD. This is a manual. And if you manage people at any level and in any capacity, you're going to deal with personal trauma in your office sooner or later. And this book is an amazing resource, so check it out. You can go to drtimmurphy.com. That is his website. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you. Stay in the pipe, buddy.
Thank you, Pierre. God bless.